Welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream, we work on Django apps. We're going to continue on my homeschool Django application tonight, and we're going to work on a new model. I have a new model for a new feature in my system, and we'll walk through the process of what is needed, how to build it, how to create the migrations, and see how far we get. With any luck, we'll actually start integrating it into the view that in the page that it's going to be used on, but that's the plan. I want to say thanks to my patrons. If you happen to support me, thank you very much. If you want to support me after you like like what you see on this stream, you can do so at patreon.com/mblehman. I really appreciate the contributions there. It helps me stay motivated to continue working on this stuff. So thank you to my patrons. Let's take a moment to talk about where we're at with this feature that we're working on, and then get into what's the change that we're going to make. So for the last couple of streams, I've been working on this teacher checklist. It's a checklist that's supposed to be a list version of a teacher's week view into this homeschool application that I build. So a customer requested that she have a list of the activities that her students would do, and then be able to mark and annotate and all of that, so that she can just get about her week easier. John, welcome. Glad you're here today. So the feature is built at a basic level, and I can show that off here probably. That would be the best way to go about this. So let's fire up the server, and we'll see what that feature looks like. And it's really just a different presentation of existing data that was already there. So from a perspective of what is I'm really adding to the site, not a whole ton yet. But we're going to look at this, and oh man, it's been a while, so testing at somewhere.com. I think I've committed that to memory by now, but cool. So here's the view for the week, as you can see, and there's some data on here, and this is this standard week view that parents would see as they're working through their homeschool with their family, and activities would be crossed out that aren't crossed out here because I'm coming to this fresh every week. But when the feature that we added was this new checklist feature. And the checklist feature will take them to this page where it takes the same data that you just saw on that previous page and converts it to this very simplistic list view. So that was like step one, the minimum version that could make my customer happy. And I pushed it out there and let her know and said, hey, look, here's the kind of thing that we discussed. It's not everything that we discussed yet, but I wanted you to have something early, even if knowing that it's going to change going forward. So now it's time to do part two of that process. And part two of the process was the ability to set which courses are actually displayed in that list. So my basic thought process here is I need to come up with some modeling, because in order to add this filtering capability, we have to store those users' preferences somewhere. And we're dealing with a new section of the application, this teachers section, and this thing is called a checklist. So the natural modeling in my head is it would be nice to have a model in the database called a checklist that could represent the user's preferences on what they see in their checklist when they click this page. So that's where my head's going about what is required. And then the next step is that I've been thinking through is, what do I actually need to change? So this list is compiled through a set of pretty complicated scheduling logic. So I don't actually want to get into that scheduling logic and actually mess with the queries that are going on in there. I really want to take the output of this list and then filter it. And that is going to be a little bit wasteful in terms of SQL resources. Like I will be allowing the application to issue more database queries than are strictly necessary, but the simplicity of the approach is what I'm going for. So my thought process is this: have a model, which I will call checklist most likely, that will exist in this teacher's app, which is the Django app that we're on. And within it, the checklist needs to do a couple of things. It needs to be, it needs to have some kind of like ability to filter out courses. So each one of these things in this list is a course. So programming, math, science, the reading, these things are present here. So my approach, my planned approach anyway, is to be pretty simplistic with this and just say, given a set of data that I'm not going to modify too much, there will be a little bit modification we'll have to make, can I filter out the courses? And so the natural thing from my perspective to add to the model is a list of courses to exclude from the checklist. That's the piece of data that I want to have. And there are a couple ways that we could go about storing that data. One way would be to have a checklist and then a secondary model that has foreign keys to every course. But as I mentioned, I'm not going to be messing with the database. I'm going to let the database do all of its querying and build all of its scheduling. So having that extra database table of checklist to excluded courses is, in my thinking, overkill. So my thought process is this. I'm going to use a JSON field, and the JSON field will hold a list, and that list will be the set of IDs of courses to exclude. So that is a critical piece. The other thing that the checklist will need to include is some notion that it belongs to a particular user. It can't just have checklists floating out there and the user have no way to access them. So I minimally need a foreign key to something that belongs to the user. And the most natural foreign key is to have it connected to the school year. The school year is the container of a set of courses for each year. And these courses will not be replicated year to year. So that is the natural container that I think. So we're going to have a checklist. It will have a foreign key to the school year. It will have a JSON field, which will be a list of IDs of courses to exclude. Those are the pieces that I'm going for. Okay, so that's my basic idea. We will actually see in practice if this idea plays out in a productive way. But that's the data that I have in my head for this particular setup. I want to start by seeing, like, I think I might need to modify some of my tools. I don't have to, but it's interesting to me to have this ability. Yeah, so I have a tool that will generate a models diagram. And I've used it on a number of occasions. And we can say open models.png. And it's out of frame here, so I'll put it into the window that you all can see. But this diagram, if the scroll wheel is not doing the zoom there. So if we zoom in on it, we can see all of the models in my system. And I just added that new teachers app. So this is a new model that I want to plug into things. And so we're going to do that to prepare for addition of this new model. Do we have to do this? No, but when I want to reference this in the future, I want this to be a complete picture. And right now, it would not be a complete picture. So this is a pretty easy change. I've got this new teachers app, and we can take this line right here and change students to teachers. There are no models for the teachers application yet, so this won't do anything significant, but it will shortly. And so after we finish generating the model, we should be able to generate the new diagram and see how it fits into the whole equation. Okay, so how should we go about this? I don't think it necessarily is a requirement to do test-driven development for this out of the gate, but there are some things that I like to always have available to all of my models. I like to have very heavy test coverage on my applications, and in order to support that, I need to have test factories, the ability to create instances very easily. And I use Factory Boy. I've talked about it many times. So we're not only going to make the checklist model, but we're going to make a checklist factory so that we can get that stuff and test against it very easily. So let's move to the teacher's models file, which should be empty. Yep. And let's also move to the teacher's tests area. There's one file in existence, but we need a second one. So we're going to go up a directory and create a new file called testmodels.py. All right. A lot of what I'm about to do is kind of boilerplate that I have in other files. So I'm going to actually open up a separate file that can act as like things that I can copy from. So let's go to, let's say, students test models. And let's put that in a split, actually. So we've got our test models here above, and then we've got our other test case here. So I want this stuff, sort of. I want most of this stuff. Let's take all that, and we've got this. Now, we need to change this around. So what we're really doing is we're testing not for a student, so let's substitute student for checklist. I think that's a decent name. It doesn't need to be like teacher checklist or anything because I'm already in the teacher's app. So we've got our checklist factory, and then we can change the local variable from student to checklist. All right. So if you can see, my editor is still telling me that, hey, you can't do this yet. You don't have a factory imported. So let's do that now. So from homeschool teachers tests. Now I don't have this file yet, so I'll have to create it in a moment. So factories is where I typically put all my factories. They go in my test directory. And then we'll say import checklist factory. My editor is going to notice that, hey, that doesn't exist. You can't do that. So we need to go create that file too. In fact, I think I'm done with this. So let's go borrow from over here. And I'll just steal all that for a moment. We'll create a new file now. Call it factories. And we'll paste in some stuff here. We don't need any of these parameters because those are specific to students. But we do need to have this be, let's highlight those lines to change that to checklist. And then we want to change this students to be from the teacher's app. So this will still fail though, because there's no model defined. But now we have, I think we probably have enough to go over to the test and try and run it and let it show us it will fail. So the result of this test is pretty boring to say that we'll actually get a real instance, but it won't get past this line is my belief. And we can confirm that. Yep, teacher's app does not have a checklist model. So it's telling us exactly what might I expected. So now we're ready to go and start our modeling. So just like in any other model file, we need from Django DB import models. Jeffrey Babb, my editor is Vim. So I'm a longtime Vim user. I do a fair amount of customization on it with plugins of various kinds. So it's not your standard Vim editing experience, but it works for me. I've shared this on a number of occasions. I don't know if you're a Vim user yourself. You can go look at my .files directory, and this file has most of my plugins. You're welcome to peruse that, see what's in there. And if you have any more questions about it, I'm happy to pause and answer some of those. All right, so let's create our new model, and it's going to be the checklist model, which will be, you're welcome, Jeffrey, models.model, and a checklist for teachers to plan their week. I don't know. It's a crappy doc string, but it'll work for now. So we've got that stuff. I think our test should pass at this point because there is a factory there. So everything's good. Our model doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any data in it yet, but the factory itself knows how to produce a checklist instance at this point. So why do I do this? I do this because I end up using factories in tons of other test files. So I will test against a Django view, or I will test some logic in my application, and I don't really want to spend a ton of time trying to build custom instances for each test. So Factory Boy gives you this really excellent speed boost to kind of define what does a standard checklist look like, and then you can quickly call those and invoke those things, just like you can see here on line 7. So I have this style of making a test factory and then adding the stuff that's required to it in my app. So the next thing we're going to do, I said we need a foreign key to a school year. So we're going to do that. So we need to do school year, and that's going to be models.foreignkey. And the model that we want to define, I want to use a string to reference the other app. So this is the school year is in the schools app, and school year is the model we're after. And then we have to specify the onDelete behavior. So whenever a school year is deleted, almost like the podcast. Yeah, it's actually the same microphone that I use for the podcast. And when I do my podcast recording, I actually record to OBS and then I export it. So it literally, there's some minor tweaks that I do for when I'm podcasting, but yeah, it's mostly the same. So when we have the onDelete behavior, we have a school year, and onDelete says, what happens when the school year that is connected gets deleted? What should we do with the checklist? And the reason that we have to specify that is because of database constraints, honestly. If you're not familiar with database constraints, it's an idea of doing referential integrity, or that's sort of a fancy term, but it just means that your database is trying to help you be consistent so you don't shoot yourself in the foot with bad data. So, for instance, a foreign key is expected, is given a constraint that says you will always have a value. And so if the foreign key value of your school year is, say, 42 as just an ID number, and that school year 42 gets deleted, then 42 for a checklist doesn't mean anything anymore. So you wouldn't be able to do any lookups on attributes of the school year because that row in that other table is gone. So you have to decide what to do about that. And the models system gives you some options to say, you can either set it to null, or you can take some other options that have different effects. The effect that I'm wanting is to cascade. And what that says is, if you delete a school year, it means that this checklist has no value either, because if you think about the purpose of this checklist, it's only to see what should we be filtering out for this particular school year. So it's a logical step to say, okay, the delete behavior when a school year is deleted is to also delete this checklist. So that's what we'll be using today. There are a bunch of other options. You can go read the Django documentation to learn more about what onDelete will do for some other stuff. What else should we add? Trying to think if I need... Yeah, we probably should do at least one more. And that one more is the related name. The related name is an attribute that will specify how to get this data from a different model. So if you're on the school year, how can you get any checklists pertaining to the school year? And so that's what related name is for. And by default, I'll just type it out here, but it would be the name of the model, in this case checklist, followed by _set. And that's just like conventionally what's done by Django. But the more natural name is checklist. So it's a kind of just a way to give a more natural English name to your related name. Sometimes the model name that you have doesn't work by just adding an S. And rather than try and guess and give you a really crummy value for your related name, Django gives you this, uses that _set, which is sensible in a lot of cases. But I like to use plurals of the actual model name we're going with, which is why I'm adding this related name attribute. Okay, so importantly, there are a couple parameters that I did not set on this model. One of them is that I could have done is called null equal true, which would have allowed null values to be on this record. But I don't want that. I don't want to have a school year ever be missing because I need it for access control and other stuff like that. So we have to allow it to always have a value and enforce it, in fact. But now watch what happens when we come over to the test and try and run the test. It's going to fail this time. And we get a failure that says you have an integrity error. So it's your database trying to protect you from yourself. And because what's happening is that Factory Boy is attempting to create an instance that has no school year attached to it because we didn't instruct it on how to build a school year. And so it's attempting to set it to none. And because we don't have null equal true on that foreign key, the whole database is blowing up when you try and create the instance, which is exactly what you want. So again, Django is trying to protect us. So the way that we're going to go fix that is by going back to our factory. And I'm going to come to this factory first and steal this line. And then we'll return to our teachers' factories. So what we're going to use is something called a sub-factory. And a sub-factory is a way of saying, hey, I don't really care about the particular school year in this default case. If I don't give you any parameters, just build me a school year so that I make sure that the school year constraint is satisfied. So we say school year as the parameter, and then we need to map it up to the actual factory that we care about, which is in the test factories area of the schools app, but it's the school year factory. So now if we come back here, in fact, we should also be able to add an assert that says the checklist school year is not none. And, I'm positive that this would be the case because we don't allow none, but it kind of declares the contract of the model, and it's just some way to test the data attributes on it. So let's try that out. Okay, cool. Now it's time to add the list of stuff that we want to exclude from our checklist. So to me, the natural name is excluded courses. Hopefully that's pretty evident of what I'm trying to go for. So we'll say, and I guess I could be a little bit more precise by saying excluded courses or course IDs, but I think that's getting a little too narrow. And there's also always the possibility that maybe I want to store a little bit more data in here than just course IDs. I don't have any plans to do that, but there's always a chance that I could rework this. So we're going to call this excluded courses, and then we'll say, what will we say? This is going to be a JSON field. And we need to needs a default. That's the thing that's important. And the default will allow us to, if we give it a default, then we will not have to give something to the factory because the Django itself will be providing our default. So we can say default equals, and then here's where it gets a little weird. Let me bring up the Django docs about JSON field and refresh my memory because I could be off on this and I don't want to mislead you all. So Django model JSON field is what we're after. No, that was Stack Overflow. Come on. Well, at least they're taking me to the reference now. So this is new as of Django 3.1, I think. But because it used to be JSON fields weren't available for every database supported by Django. For instance, SQLite didn't have JSON field support. And I believe it was added as a Google Summer of Code project to get that on there so that we could have JSON field support for all of the databases, including Postgres and MySQL and SQLite, which I believe are the primary drivers supported by the database API. And there, you can even see comments to that effect of like JSON field just used to be on Postgres, but that has changed. So we have this JSON field, but there's some interesting aspects to it. I think I want to say that JSON field is really a character field in disguise. And this matters because of what I set the default to. All right, not finding it right away. Yeah, that's a bummer. Let's go. Can we get the code here? Let's change. That is a good question. How you create a product like me? Well, practice. So I would say don't create a product like me initially. Start out with a small application. And there are lots of ways you can start out with small application. You need to get some experience to kind of build up to what I'm doing here. And recognize also that the application that I'm showing each of these weeks that I'm streaming is it takes has been built up for a couple of years. So you could go to this project, and I encourage you to. MB Layman Homeschool is where this code repository lives, and over time, this will start to feel more and more overwhelming to someone who's brand new. And that's not, I'm not trying to discourage you. It's just a recognition that my app is getting more mature. And what I'm trying to do with this stream is provide an example of a real world application serving real customers using Django. So it's just a consequence of what I'm doing. But I do highly encourage people to start a project. And start a small project. And the reason is manyfold. So I run a local meetup in my town. I live in Frederick, Maryland, and I run the local Python meetup. And I get this question frequently, not just about specifically building apps, but how do I learn about Python and stuff? And what I tell all of those people, and I'm telling you as well, is have a project, because if you have a project, then it will hopefully motivate you when things get less interesting, I'll say, maybe even boring. There are parts of programming that are frustrating, that are not exciting, that will make you bang your head on stuff, and you need some kind of motivation to get over that hump. And if all you are doing is intellectually studying it, you can do that, but where's the drive? If something gets hard, what's going to keep you going? And so I found that for me and for others who I've seen succeed, they usually have something to keep them going beyond that. So find a little project. It doesn't have to be an important project, but enough to build something interesting that you care about, and then get going on it. But you still the question remains, how can I learn? I see in your chat there. And so that is complicated, and it depends on your preferences about learning. So one way you can learn is I have a website, and I have a series on my website called Understand Django, which starts and ends and it doesn't cover everything in Django, but it kind of walks you through a mental framework from literally from the browser, from the point of view of a top-down, of let's educate you on the pieces and build up your knowledge so that you have some kind of mental model in your head that you can help build your apps with. So you could use that. That may not be the best start, or you might want to use it as a companion to other ways of going about this. So if you go to Django Project and djangoproject.org, project.com, yep, did I get that right? Yeah, .com. On the Django website, you can click this big button. For some reason, I always look past the big buttons. That's just how my brain works. But you can either click that big button and get started there, but eventually you'll get routed. If you follow along and get stuff installed, you'll eventually get routed to the tutorial. And the tutorial is a step-by-step build that will walk you through the process of getting your first Django app going. And it's a little like polls application, like a voting kind of thing, just to give you exposure to working with models and views and templates and all of this other stuff that goes along with a Django project. So that's one place. There is another tutorial that's popular that I have not used, so I would recommend it because I've heard good things about it, but I just can't speak to it, and it's from Django Girls. The Django Girls website has their own tutorial, which I don't know anything about this tutorial beyond the fact that it exists. So hopefully, get a project, get some reading material if you want from my website, get started with one of these tutorials and try that out, and good luck to you. Yeah, it's an interesting journey to get into Django, I think. Jeffrey, you said it takes objects. Looks like a callable is best. That's, maybe I have a misunderstanding. Okay, here we go. If you give the field a default, ensure it's an immutable object, such as a string, or a callable that returns a fresh mutable object instance, such as a dict. Okay. Yep, okay. So I think based on this, what we want for our default is the list callable. So let's try that out. So let's put list right here. And every time, so what does this, this means, like, think about it this way. When Django is going to build one of these instances and it needs to create a default, it's going to call list like this. And if you call list like that, with the parentheses, it's going to create an empty list. So list with the parentheses is equivalent of doing this. They're the same, except one is using the function call syntax and the other is just using square brackets. So if we have this, then we should be able to come over here and say assert checklist excluded courses is equal to an empty list. Whoops, excluded courses. Cool. So I think these two pieces of information are the data that we need for this. So let's clean this up a little bit. Let's get this created so that we can start working with it. And maybe there's a little bit more that we should do. Okay, in most of these apps, you don't have to have this, but there's the Django admin. So if you're using the Django admin interface to browse any of your data, and you may want to do this, then you need to define an admin. And the admin is just a way to look at the data. So we will do that here. And I'm going to say, I'm going to steal, again, a lot of these patterns that it's nice, like Django is so consistent that you can kind of steal from one file and just reuse it in other places and design for what you need. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to change to here and say models import checklist. And we're going to use this admin to check our data once we've actually made it. So now we can redo that substitution to change student to checklist. And then we can clean out and add the fields that we care about. So I'm going to have an ID and the school year. And then, so that's what's going to be in our list view, which will make more sense in a minute. And then let's leave the school year as a raw ID field rather than a selector field. Again, these are attributes. You can go learn about the Django admin and all of these class attributes that are available to you, but these are a couple of things that are useful. So this gives us minimally something to work with. Okay, so we've got our new model. We've got tests for our new model. So that's all good. And I think we're ready. I think we're ready. So let's make a new migration. The migration system is for applying changes to your database. Oh, that's interesting. I have something coming in from. I've got upgrades on some of my other external packages here. Interesting. Okay, well, we're going to focus on one of those migrations. I don't know one of them. So this one, DJ Stripe, is from a different app. I don't really understand their system in this regard. It's like I can't create migrations for their project locally, so I'm going to have to like run this manually on my production site, which will be a little annoying. Anyway, not a whole lot I can do about that. And then we're going to ignore whatever accounts changed. I must have upgraded my simple history external library, and it brought along some kind of change. What we're focused on is down here, this teachers thing that we just made. And now that we created that migration, we actually can go into the migrations directory and we can see it here. And then I'm going to save it because Black is going to want to auto format it into something a little cleaner. So you can see what we're creating. Data on your site is hard, not hard, but it's annoying to fix later if you got it wrong. So I like to spend a little bit more time, maybe than necessary, when going through some of these data changes to be confident that, hey, this thing that I'm making locally, is this really what I want to have on my production website? Or am I prepared to like clean that up if I don't have it? So that's what I'm thinking through with this. So let's run this migration. And it's going to run all three of those migrations. We're not going to worry about the other two. I'm pretty confident that they are doing what I expect them to do. And we should be able to start up the web server again and return to the app. And then we'll go to a new location and look at some stuff. So from my app, since I'm logged in as an admin user, I have a couple of extra links here that normal users don't see. The office here is my Django admin interface. And by adding that admin configuration that you saw, there should be at the bottom a new teachers app. And here it is, teachers, checklists. So there are not going to be any of these yet, but we could create one and see what it does. So we need to link to a school year. I'm just going to pick this one right at the top. So we have a link there. And you can see the effect of that default list callable that we added is this field is really just like a text field. So these are, I'm just scrolling through. It's 2 characters. It's hard to see. It looks like a little rectangle, but that's an open and close square brackets, which will parse as a JSON, is what a Python list will be transformed into when it is output as JSON format. So if we save this thing, I did record. Wow, that's tricky. Here's why we can do some of this stuff. This field is required. It thinks that that is not right. So this is interesting. So what's happening on your models, you can put some behavior for how do you want this to validate when used against the admin. And the default for one of these options is called blank. And blank is false by default, which basically says you cannot submit something that is false. But here's a really interesting circumstance that I did not anticipate at all. Like I would expect if this was empty, yeah, sure, that would be this field is required. But when it's just this open and close, I would have expected that to work. So this is very surprising behavior to me. It almost even feels like a bug. That's a debate for a different session. But what's probably happening is the validation is going through and an empty list evaluates to a falsy value in Python. Let's just show it. Python, bool of an empty list. So should be a false. So my guess is the admin system is looking at this empty list and thinking, oh, you are treating that as something that's not there, something that's empty. So it's basically blank, which I don't necessarily agree with that definition, but I guess that could be a call that somebody decided was the appropriate thing to do for maybe specific reasons that I'm not considering. So what does that mean we have to do? It means we have to change our model. And again, this comes back to like why you want to try and get this stuff right in the first place. What I want to do is I only want to apply a single migration. So we're going to go and roll back that model change that we just added. And we're going to say, oh, this is where I'm going to have to bring up the help. So there's an option. So this is the first migration for the teacher's app. So there's a special thing that you have to do if it's the first migration. Normally, if you're like, let's say you're the fourth migration and you need to roll back a migration, you could say manage, migrate teachers, and then specify the previous migration number that you want to roll back to, like an 0003 if you were on number 4. But here we are as the first migration. So pay attention to this line right here. Use the name 0 to unapply all migrations. And that's the only way that I know of to undo the 0001 migration, the initial migration. We're going to unapply it. And we needed to do that because it's actually going to my local SQLite database table and deleting this teacher's checklist table that it created under the covers. Because what we're about to do is delete this file, this 0001 initial. If I didn't undo the migration first and then tried to make a new first migration with this change that we're about to do, and then tried to reapply it, Django would have failed. It would have said, this table already exists. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. So that might have been a little confusing to you. The migration system gets a little messy. We're going to come over here, and we're going to go to the end now and say blank equal true. So we want to allow, this is our way of allowing that empty list. And in most cases, this won't be how users use it. But I can imagine a case where a user goes and edits their checklist where I'm going to create one of these records and then unchecks some schools that they didn't want to see, and then has that for a while, but then they decide, you know what, actually I do want to see all the schools, and they go back and check the boxes again. And that's where it would blank out this JSON field, and we don't want that to blow up in the user's face. So we're really anticipating like this really weird edge case with this, but that's what we need to do. All right, so now we're ready to make our migrations again. So make migrations. And I will highlight, we'll come back, you see we got a new 0001 initial file here. And then I'll save it. And here's now where I can point out, I probably could have done this by manually manipulating the migrations, but it always makes me a little bit nervous. So I just figured I'll let Django do it for me. So I've got it here, and what it did was add this blank equal true to the migration system. Django uses these files to put together what is the database DDL, the data definition language, the instructions that I'm going to issue to the database to create a new database. And if you're curious, you can see that information. So we can say manage SQL migrate is the command we're interested in. We can give it the app, which will be teachers, and we can say 0001, and it will show you what it would execute for the database that you're working with. Locally, I'm using SQLite, so this is a SQLite command to create a database table. Okay, that was probably way more information than you maybe cared about. But to finish it off, we'll re-migrate this stuff. So we've got our table back. We'll start up the web server again. We'll come back to this page. I'm going to refresh this page. No, I'm going to go back to, let's just start over. Let's go back to the checklist page. So we're not going to save this. We're going to add a new checklist, pick a school year, and with any luck, we won't get that validation error this time because it will allow blank to be true, so it will allow an empty list. Hey, cool. There we go. So we've got our new checklist, and then we've got the year that it applies to. This is not a particularly useful display right now, because like you could think this might seem useful, but remember that my application serves lots of users, so you could have tons of people with a 2022 to 2023 school year. That would be a very normal thing. This particular label is generated by the stir method of the model. So if we wanted to have something more meaningful and find, like, if somebody was complaining that, hey, I've got a problem with my checklist, then we might want to put in some extra fields here to say, like, well, this is actually Johnny's, school year, whatever the user's name is. I'm not going to bother with that. I just wanted to demonstrate that we've got some data in there and we've got a valid checklist to work with. Okay, so I think that's the data piece of this puzzle. One more thing we can do is we can use that makefile target of making a graph, and we'll update our models diagram, hopefully. We can say open models PNG, and then we can go find the checklist wherever it may be. Big enough. So it should be attached to the school year. School year, there it is, right here, checklist. So it has an ID field that was a big auto field that was created for it. And we have a foreign key to the school year, and then we have this excluded courses JSON field, which isn't connected to anything else, but it's a data attribute that's in there. So now we've expanded the models that are available to the application. All right, let's talk about what we're going to do next. The data is ready, so let's think about how is I going to make this work. All right, let me get a drink of water and think about it, and I'll explain. Maybe the best way to go is to orient ourselves with the view that's actually the checklist view. So let's go, we're in the teacher's app already. We can go to the views and see what it is. Here's the view. There's not a lot in here. This is exactly what we want. So what I want to do eventually is have this the schedules as a list. All right, I'm still not displaying this super well. So let me show you what that data looks like itself. So we're going to start the app up again with the debug toolbar. And we'll go back to the site. And we will take a look at the data. So the schedules thing here that's coming out of this school year get schedules operation is a very large data structure that builds all of this stuff. So we need to look at that data. So you can look at this data. If a sunrise, my editor is Vim. So I got that question earlier, this chat, probably should just type it out. In fact, I don't know if you have the back chat on, I don't know how YouTube does that, but if you look at the back chat, you can see that there is a link to my Vim RC files, which shows all of my plugins and stuff that I use, if you want to reference that. So if we look at the template and open up the context, we can see the schedules that were added to the context. And it's this big list structure that is a list of objects, and that object there's one object dictionary for each student that has a list of courses, and there is the course right here. So what we want to do is to check. We want to like essentially build the schedule and then filter this to say like if I get the data from the excluded courses and compare that to what's in this list, can I trim that out of the schedule and not display it? So that's the way that we're going to approach this. So in order to do that, we would assume that, well, maybe we can synthesize this and then have the edit in there later. Yeah, we could totally do that. So we're going to hack in the data, assuming that we get the right structure. And then we'll show the comparison, make sure it works, and then try out what I'm looking for. Not making a lot of sense, but this will hopefully make more sense in a moment. So, how do we hack this in there? Not hack. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm using the wrong language. Let's see. We want a helper function. This will be filter excluded courses. I'm probably going to move this later, but I'm just trying to sketch it out for the moment. And we're going to take schedules as our input. And what you can see up above is the schedules as a type of list. And we're going to modify this in place, which I normally don't recommend, but I think that's what I want to do. The other bit that we're going to need is the school year, because that's how we're going to look up a checklist. That's why we added that foreign key. So we can say checklist is equal to checklist objects dot filter, where we want school year equal to school year. Like even this is like stuff that I want to move to other, like I'm looking at this code and I'm doing this. It's almost like when you're doing the writing and you're like writing your first draft and it's like, whoa, this is not good. Or it's not great, but it works and it gets the idea across. I'm kind of doing the same thing right now with the intent to come back and like clean up so that this fits nicely. Because you can see above, by the time you're working with this later, I mean, this reads pretty cleanly because we've hidden things in methods and made it, just cleaned up the API design. So I'm doing this a little raw right now, and then we will improve it a little later. So we want to get a checklist, and we want to filter it by the school year. And we can assume that we already did the proper access control. Oh goodness, now I need to go. Did I do the proper access control? Sorry, y'all. Let's I want some peace of mind here that I'm not messing with my users, because this is important to me. Schools models. Get year 4. Okay, yeah, the user has to be good. So this is they'll only get a school year if it's their school year. That's what this check is showing. That was what I was getting worried about. So I should trust myself a little bit more sometimes. I'm pretty good about testing and make sure that people can only access what they are supposed to. So by this point where we have a school year, is the reason I brought all that up is because we can trust that it belongs to the user that's requesting the page. So if we can trust that, if we've got essentially this school year is trustworthy, then if they do actually get a checklist out, that is also belongs to them, because the check will only be creating checklists that are associated with particular school years, which a user has to be the owner of. So it's not just any random user can get any random checklist. That's not how this will work. All right, so we do that filter, and then we say, give me the first one. Because I'm not doing a one-to-one field. I probably could have, but I don't feel like it. Usually it's not helpful enough for my purposes. So if there's a checklist, then we're going to do something. Otherwise, we're not. So we've got a checklist, and we're going to have, well, the other thing we can check against, so it's two things. It's checklist and that there are actually excluded courses. If that turns out to be an empty list, we don't care. We'll pass, and we're not going to do anything else. So then I'm going to do this. I want the excluded courses to be a set because it makes for faster comparison. So if you had somebody, imagine a case where you had a parent that has, let's go very extreme. They got 10 kids. All 10 kids are doing school desk, and each of those 10 kids has 15 courses for their whole year because they have some in one semester and some in another. Anyway, they've got a lot of courses. So that's 150 things. And let's say that the things that the parent wants to exclude is perhaps as large as 50 or 60 of those. If you do that as a list, and if you're trying to filter out stuff, as we'll see in a second, and you're looping through a list to see, is this thing in here? Lists execute that kind of thing in linear time. And the reasons have to do with Python's internals, but it's like, it goes through each item in the list to say, like, are you the thing? Are you the course? Are you the ID? Are you the ID? Are you the ID? And it will go all the way through them. But if you transform it into a set object, then there's something about Python's internals that says, oh, I know how to do that really quickly now. I don't know if it internally turns it into some kind of hash map to do faster lookups. I don't know how it works, to be honest, but I do know that sets are faster at doing comparisons, which is what we're going to use. We're going to say set the checklist excluded courses. So that should give us a set of data, a set of IDs to be checking against. Now we're ready to go through the schedule. So for schedule in schedules, how do I want to do this? I'm sorry, I'm not talking this through. I'm anticipating a problem that's going to come up. Because as I said, we're planning to modify the list of courses that gets shown and take them out of the list before they get rendered. So we want the ID, let's say we want to take out the math class. We don't want to show that for some reason. We want that out of there. In order to take that out, you have to remove it from this list right here, which means we have to modify the list of that structure that's already been returned. But in order to even check against them, we need to go through all the courses because it's kind of embedded inside a dictionary in that list. So this is the comparison piece of data. So we can't just say delete. But I think there's a trick. I think if you do it in reverse, you can update stuff in place, and it won't mess with your indexing and stuff in your iteration. So that's what I've been thinking through. So we're going to go through the outside order. We're not changing. We're not deleting anything. Like if there's, yeah, we're just not going to deal with that scenario. So we can say for schedule in schedules, because that will correspond to each student. And then within there, why can't we simply use objects delete? What is objects delete? We're not deleting anything from the database, if that's what you're asking. We don't want to do that. So we're modifying a data structure that is being used for rendering the page, and it's rendered once, and so we want to modify that thing quickly. And so I don't know. Yeah, I think that just there's some weird iteration bugs that happen if you delete something. If you delete from something you're iterating over in Python using Python's iterators, which is the default, that there's some weird behavior that can happen. And it's very subtle. I want to say Anthony Sotili has a good explainer video on that on YouTube. Let's see if we can find it. YouTube, Anthony Sotili. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm spelling your name wrong. Anthony Sotili. YouTube. Delete iteration. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to get us a link. No idea if this is the right one or not. All right, I'm not gonna try and track that down, but you should check out Anthony. He's awesome. He's really not this Anthony. I'm looking for Code with Anthony. I don't know what his YouTube is. It might not be. It's not this guy. Professional actor living in Melbourne. No, I think Anthony lives in the Midwest. So maybe his YouTube name might be Code with Anthony, like it is on Twitter. Anyway, he's a very prolific person on Python, in the Python community. He works on PyTest and pre-commit and tons of other great tools. He's a sharp guy and has a explanation video on why you should do your iteration deletion stuff backwards, which goes into detail of the ideas that I'm not expressing very eloquently here. So if you find the video, FA, let me know. I'm interested. See if you can dig it up. So we're going to iterate over the schedules. Each schedule corresponds to one student, and then within that we're going to iterate over the courses, and that's where we're going to do that, I think, in reverse, because we could be deleting from those courses potentially. So for course, no, we want to enumerate. Yeah. Course and index in reversed enumerate. Again, this is the hacky version. I will try and clean it up later. So schedule courses. Let's just print for a moment. See that we actually got the course in the index in the order that I was anticipating. And then we'll add it to our view, and we'll just pay attention to the console as we're doing this. And there's other things that we've been excluding. So from homeschool, nope, we're in the teacher's app already. So from .models import checklist. I'm going to do a relative import to get that in there. And we're not using this excluded set yet, so we'll just comment that out for a moment. And what did I mess over here? No overload variant. Huh? It's not a sequence because it returns tuple pairs. So I think we need to put reversed on the inside. Okay. Let's see if I got that right. We're going to refresh this page. Oh, we didn't call it. It's not going to show us anything. So we want to pass in this filter method, or pass the schedules into this filter method. We need to pass it the school year, and we need to pass it the schedules so that it can process this data. Eventually, I will probably move this method to a model. Well, probably even the checklist model. I'm not 100% on that yet. So all I'm doing is, oh, I said object. Whoops. All I'm doing is making typos and mistakes. So the manager is attached to the object attribute, not object. So let's try that again. And in due time, I will write tests for all of this. But the proof, I'm going for the proof that this will work in the way I want it to, and then we'll come back through and clean up, test, make sure it's all good and ready. So, well, interesting. It printed nothing. That's surprising. Why did you print nothing? Oh, there's no checklist. Duh. Okay. We just want to see the stuff printed for now. We'll just do that. We're really hacking it until we can get something. Should have built this up with doing that list iteration first. Okay, so the index is going to be wrong. It went backwards, I think, but then it enumerated them. Look, that would have messed me up big time. Programming is first, math is second, but it did, and it did go in the reverse order as I expected it to, but it gave an index that would be wrong. So if I tried to delete from that list using that index, it's not going to be the right number. So I must be doing this a little bit off from the right way to do this. I guess I could do, I don't have to delete from the index. I could use a different method. There's many list methods. There's more than one way to delete. So, the natural way to delete would be to use the index operation. But there are other ways to do this. So Python, I always have a hard time finding in the documentation the standard list methods. Here we are with list. Where are all the operations? We want to delete from the list. Like it's funny how the basic things are difficult for me to find. I think what we want is remove. And so that's where, like, if you're removing and you're iterating at the same time, you could mess up the iteration process, I think. That's how that would work. So this should be safe if we were to say, if we want to remove the math class. So let's try it out. In fact, we've got the course. We know that the course name is math. So if course name equal math, then schedule courses remove course. So we know for a fact that it's going to be in that list. Int, whoops, I even got my enumerate backwards. Man, I've not been doing enough Python programming recently. So a course should have a name attribute, I'm pretty sure. Let's check on the course model, make sure that that's right. Yeah, it's a name attribute. And we know for certain that one of these is a course called math. That's uppercased by the template, but I'm pretty sure it's M-A-T-H. We could print out to confirm. We could say removing math just to make sure that that's happening. And I think we're ready to retry now. Dict object. Oh, rats. That's not even the course because it's right. Stinker. Okay. Let's see the structure again. What? Where did my debug toolbar go? Not being quite as succinct anymore, but hopefully you're getting the idea. Like sometimes development is just messy, right? We're getting through it though. All right, so this list of courses is actually another dictionary that has course in it. So really what we need to do, this thing right here is not really a list of courses, it's like course info. And what we need, I think we're done printing that out. What we need right here is course info course, like that. And then we want to remove the course info dictionary from the schedule. That's what we're after. All right, let's see how that goes. Okay, we got the behavior that we're looking for. Nothing blew up. Iteration went fine because we were going in. So we started from the bottom. So how? Let me make sure I'm thinking about this properly. This is the way to do this. I think it has to do with when you delete from a list. I may be overthinking this whole problem. I know that there's something about reversing when you do deletes to do it safely because of iteration. Could I explain yeah, I can explain. I'll take a second to do that in just a moment. I'm just trying to think through this reversing stuff and if I'm doing it the right way. I have a feeling I'm a little bit off and I might need to go review, find that link to that video I mentioned about Anthony and see if I can find out if I did it properly because it was subtle. All right, FA, I'll try and explain. So here's all this code down here is not actually happening yet. We're not doing anything with a checklist at this point. So maybe that I've got too many things. I'm kind of like, it's my sketch pad and you're seeing my notes, and I'm not really making something very clear and consumable. But I'll walk you through that. So this view, when you go to that route, that checklist page of Teachers Checklist 2022-717, it comes to this Django view, and it finds the week, and it finds the appropriate school year for my logged in user. That's the request user. So this does a database query and gets the school year, and for further manipulation. From there, it falls into this if clause, which says, I have a school year, therefore we can ask for the schedules given, and the schedules is a very complex calculation that we don't really need to get into, but it requires the current day and the week that you want to get the schedules for, the bounding week of what days do you care about seeing. That schedules logic does a ton of stuff to go build this up. And it looks through the school year, and it gets all of the course records, and it checks against break days and all of these other things that we didn't need to discuss at all. And the end result is no more query sets or anything. It's just a dictionary or a list of dictionaries of attributes that are built in such a way that they are prepared to be displayed by the templates. And the templates, there are two different templates that care about this. There is the grid-like template that is the week view that where parents spend most of the time. And then there's this checklist view, which is this vertical list. So that is post-database querying. What we're doing with this filtering part right now is we're saying, look at that list of stuff that was already calculated. And in that list, take out the things that I'm telling you to take out. So we're taking out the math class. We're going over all of the courses that we can find, and if anything happens to be named math, we're taking it out and deleting it from the schedule with that remove method. Because remember, this thing right here, courses in this dictionary, is a list. And so it's taking the dictionary out from that list. In other words, we're looking at the context, it's taking out one of these. Okay? Think there. It's taking out that. But it was doing for the math one. It's not doing, this is the programming one, it's just an example. So it takes that out, and now the list object, the schedules, that then gets passed into the template is now smaller. We've removed it. The template engine never even sees it. So when we come over here and you look at the template context, it's not like you can see the math class anymore. We've actively removed it from that data structure. So that was the process. So I did it backwards from what's in the list of courses, but I might have messed that up. So I'm going to go check. I'm going to assume that this is not right now, that I'm getting something slightly wrong, because yeah, I could just be getting something wrong, that could be messing up iteration in subtle ways. But it will work for the time being for what we need to do, and maybe I'll come back next time and be like, actually it was right, or no, here's what was wrong. But I want to go confirm that this logic works because I want my app to work in all cases. So now it's time to actually make a checklist that we can then check against. And we need to check against what? Let's print out a little bit more here. First of all, let's get the course out of this thing. Kind of silly that we keep using this dictionary. This is one of the downsides of using all of these big nested data structures, is that it gets hard to see what is the actual data versus what is just the structure that's trying to support rendering and stuff. So I'm pulling the course out of this course info object so that we can just reference it directly and still do our little math comparison. And at this moment, I want to print out what is the course ID, and then I want to print out what is the type of the course ID, because I think it's not going to be what I think it is. And I'm doing this because we're about to simulate a checklist. I need to make sure I put the right stuff in the checklist. Let's come back through here. I'm going to refresh this page so we'll go through the view again. And should be printing out this extra information now. Oh man, it is. Okay. So it's a class of a hash ID, which is not what I thought it would be. I thought it would be a primitive type. But when it gets printed, it looks like that. So now it's time to create something that we could remove. So we want this thing, I think, is what we're after. So I'm going to go, we're going to now fake a checklist that will actually be something that we can retrieve and then compare against. So the first thing to do is come back up to the office, the Django admin, go back to the teachers area in this checklist, and we'll just reuse this first one. We have to select the right school year. So that's what I don't know. That this one, hold on one second. We need to get the right ID. School years. Okay, GE0P. Okay. So if we do this lookup and change this, and we pick this one right here, that corresponds with the school year that we're testing against currently. GE0PX04. Yep. All right, the other thing that we need to do is put in some proper JSON here. And again, I'm faking this right now. We'll build checklists for real in a later time, but I want to build what I think it's going to be for now. So we're putting something in our excluded courses. It is a list with a string inside of it, has the string ID. Let's save that. That saves okay. And now if we come back here, we should be able to start using some of this other stuff. So let's take that out. Let's uncomment these lines. Let's move our schedules stuff back down here. And let's print the checklist excluded courses. Okay. Try our checklist page again. Good, we can see, here it is. Here's a list, MZLD. So now, with any luck, we can do our comparison. And we can say, we've got our excluded courses set. And then we're going to, instead of having course equals math, we'll do we might need to convert to a string type here, but maybe not. So let's try it the simple way and see if it actually does what we expect. If not, we'll do the other thing I think we might need to do. Okay, and I think we can get rid of a bunch of stuff here. So now we've switched it to the logic that I expect to be be using. We're checking the ID, and if this ID is in this set, we're saying, all right, time to take it out. And it happens to be the math class, so we're still going to print that out for a moment. But this may not work. Nope. Whoops. 39. What did I do? I forgot a semicolon. I forgot a colon, I mean. And now it's not going to. Okay. Syntax errors aside, let's see if we got it. It took out programming. Was that the ID for programming? Did I get that ID wrong? Oh, because we reversed the order. Yeah, so that was the ID for programming, not for math. Math one's actually up there. Okay, but it worked. Like it took out the programming class is now removed. So it did. I was afraid I might have to like wrap this in a stir call like this, but it must be that ID is able to do smarter comparisons than that, because it's a special type of field that's got some magic going on for hash purposes. So this is the effect that we want. We've got a checklist, and now once we have the checklist and confirm that it actually has courses to look at, we go over the stuff and we take out the course if there's one to actually remove. So this is the core of the change, but this is dense and pretty nasty in some ways. So I think there's probably work that we can do to clean this up and it just make it a little nicer. So I think what I want to do, how should we start thinking about what to clean here? Maybe first of all, I don't want this function to live in this view. Like, it's very specific to functionality related to checklists. So the natural place for it to live is in the checklist model. So that's probably the first step, is like, can we refactor this to put it with a checklist? Which I believe we can. So this is going to be, we don't necessarily know if we have a checklist yet though. This needs to be a class method on the checklist. Because we have the class, but we don't have the, we don't necessarily have a checklist to check against. So we'll say, we can call this, instead of saying filter out the excluded courses, I'm going to change this to be filter the schedules. Filter schedule, yeah, schedules. And then where it's going to take a class instance, or the class itself, and we'll take it still needs to take the school year, which we'll add some type annotations. I've been finding those very handy, so we're going to put them here too. So a school year, and we'll take the schedules, and then it's going to edit in place, so it's not going to return anything. Filter the schedules in place to remove any excluded courses. That's what we want. That's the description of the behavior. And we need to bring in the school year model to get the proper type annotation checking. So from homeschool.schools.models, import school year. Okay. So my next step is to take all of this right here and just paste it right in here. And then where we have checklist, I want to change that to class. So I think I've effectively moved this method over. And now we can say, instead of filter excluded courses, we can say checklist filter schedules. What? Argument 1 of filter schedules of checklist has incompatible type optional school year. Optional school year. Okay, all right. So it needs to go in here. After we've removed that optionality to it. There's the type checker. It caught a bug for me. That could have been a problem. All right. So what we're doing is having a guard here that lets this fall through. Another way we could do this is if not both of these things, then return none. This is using a guard clause style, and it's just allowing an early return. And by doing that, we get to ditch a whole level of indentation and make it very clear about the case that we don't care about. So it's very explicit of, if you don't have a checklist and you don't have any excluded courses, don't do anything, get out, and return none. But if you do, proceed on and start doing those operations. Just kind of makes it so you're not looking at this huge nested thing now. All right, before I carry on, because I don't have any tests yet, so let's check and make sure that this is still working. That's some of the problem of operating without tests, is I'm operating without my normal safety net. So we have to test it manually, which is a little slower, but when you're kind of doing this fast iteration stuff, sometimes it's the right way to go. So the programming thing is still gone. So that's good. So I think this may be the best we can get until I confirm if this is the right way to remove stuff while doing iteration over it. One other way I could do it. No, I can't. I have to modify in place. I was thinking maybe I could pull out all the courses, but the moment I pull them into a separate data structure, a separate flat list, then it will break my ability to modify in place. In place modification is something that should generally be frowned upon. It's not something you should reach for every day, but this is a very constrained use case that I know what I'm doing, and so I'm okay with making that decision. Yeah, I think that's about as good as I can get, because I have to modify the actual data structure. I can't like pull that out. I can't even pull that out into a variable. Well, maybe I could actually. In this case, I think maybe I could, but I don't. All right. Let's check it. Let's see that I'm right. So let's pull it out locally. And I think this is going to work because it's a list and not a singular item. If it was So it's like a kind of a pointer to stuff. Don't get wrapped up on that terminology, though. It's not really a pointer. Well, not in the strictest sense. But by doing this amount of change, it's pulling out stuff into more local variables, just like I did with this line. And you have less of the bracket syntax. There's just less line noise to read, I think. And I see another thing we can do in a moment. Let's just make sure that change worked. Okay, that still worked. I'm also realizing that I'm not using the index at all. So I don't technically need enumerate right now. Until I go back and watch Anthony's video and he's like, yes, you do. So I had a bunch of extra stuff in there that I thought I might need for deleting in a different style. All right. So I think we've got this cleaned up version. We can now delete this whole sketch thing. This starts to look a lot nicer. It kind of, there's maybe some mystery of like, why is a checklist filtering schedules? But as the author of this and the only author of this system, this will continue to make sense for me, which is who it needs to make sense for. And then we are checking against a school year and a set of provided schedules, which is right. The school year is kind of the input that helps us find the checklist, and the schedules is the output, the thing that we need to modify, sort of the inputs and outputs. Okay. I think that's probably as far as we need to take it for this evening. I mean, the functionality now works on the display side. In fact, as soon as I have the test for this, I could deploy this change, add this model, and all that would happen currently, because nobody can create a checklist, is they would always hit this line right here. And that would be okay. So let's do maybe a tiny bit more. Maybe we can knock out 1 or 2 tests, because I know I'm missing some code coverage, and then call it a night. And then the next time I stream, what we would need to do is then it would be time to be, well, how do we actually create the checklist that allows the filtering? And that would be the page. There's a new page that we have to build that will be a form that that users will be able to check and uncheck different classes. And when they save that form, it will create a checklist if one does not exist, and update those excluded course lists based on what did the user not check. So that's the idea of how that will happen. But right now, everything's going to go to line 19 here when it goes through this line 25. So if we come over to this area, we're kind of done with the looking at the application there, and we run it through the fast coverage command that I've got. It's not as fast when I stream because it's taken up a bunch of horsepower just trying to get these bytes over to you on YouTube. But once this runs, it will probably report, hey, you're missing coverage with a couple of different spots. One of them, most likely one being the portion of that filter schedules method that is when there is no schedule or is no checklist. Yeah, so it's saying we're missing lines 21 through 27, which is right where I thought it would be. We're missing these lines. And the reason we're not missing these lines is because I have a test for this view, and as I said, it's going to be safe when it comes through there, and just going to call this, and there won't be any checklist objects in any of my tests because this is a brand new concept, and it will hit this line. That's how we're getting the code coverage for that part. So what we need is a model method that will test this when there actually is a checklist object. And now actually this is a good opportunity for us to use the factory. So let's come back over here and we'll go to the teachers test models file. which I have not committed to source control yet, so it's not coming up in my Finder. Teachers, test views, and we'll just go up and down from that. So we want to check test course is excluded, test course excluded from schedule. And I have found again that putting doc strings for my tests helps with the long-term maintainability. Sometimes I add these test method names that I think are helpful, and then 6 months down the road, I'm like, what did that mean again? So I add these doc strings, even though it's obvious for me today, it will not be obvious to me 6 months from now. So a checklist excludes a course from a weekly schedule. All right, so we're going to use a checklist factory, which will create a lot of things for us. It will create the school year object, and we can use that in our own construction. And it will not create, the part that it will not create though is the actual excluded courses. We need a course factory, which means we're going to need, oh man, they're kind of interrelated, so we're going to need to create a school year first probably. So this is more stuff than I anticipated, but that's okay. So from schools test factory is import the school year factory. And we need a school year. So even though the checklist factory has the capacity to create a school year for us automatically using that sub-factory, that stuff that we talked about earlier, I want to create a school year explicitly in here because I'm going to wire it up to a course, which will be evident in just a moment. Man, this just gets, I forgot how complicated some of this stuff gets. So let's look for a course factory. Yep. Okay. If I don't, the modeling of courses is a little hairy because there's a many-to-many relationship there's a step in between the school year and the course. It's not just a one to the other. There's a grade level that's in between them. And the design of my application, because of some of the needs of my customers, is a course can be in multiple grade levels. So constructing a course factory that is connected to a school year is not as trivial as one might hope it would be. So what I actually need to do to create all the necessary pieces for this is I need to create the grade level, which will then allow me to create the appropriate course. Sorry if this is confusing. I didn't explain any of this modeling prior to this because I didn't anticipate that I would need to, but this is what I need to do. So I'm going to open up this over here for a moment. Where'd the grade level factory go? Oh, surely. Is that part of the schools models? Grade. Yeah. Okay. So what we really need is not the school year factory, but the grade level factory. And I need to be able to type it properly. And then down here, we'll be able to say grade level is equal to the grade level factory, which is going to make all the pieces that we care about, or a lot of the pieces that we care about. Because then we need to take a course with the course factory and associate a grade level. So the grade level has the school year and we have to attach that to a particular course because we will be synthesizing a schedule that will need a course in it. This will make more sense in a second, I promise. From homeschool courses test factories, import the course factory. And so now we're getting close. So now we want, like I said, the school year is attached to the grade level. So you need to make a checklist for this to test against this filter method properly. Remember, we have to find a checklist that is part of that school year. So we have to connect it to there. So this is how we're wiring all these two things together. The common thing that the checklist and the course share is a school year, but the way to get to the school year for the course is indirect through this grade level thing. A little bit finicky, but hey, that's what we have to do. All right, so now the other piece that we need is to create that appropriate schedule structure. So schedules, if you remember, is actually a list of things, and then in that, it's an object, and that object has this courses key, which is another list of things, and it's not courses directly, but this course info. Nitin, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, welcome. We're wrapping up for the evening with adding some tests to a feature I just added. That's what's going on, but happy to take your questions if you've got them. So then the final thing that we're doing here is I'm not simulating all of the pieces that go in the schedule. I'm just getting just enough to have the piece that can be filtered out and get the test coverage that we're looking for. So that is our synthetic schedule. It doesn't have any of the days, it doesn't have any of the students, but it has enough to do this test with. So now, hey Stephen, welcome. I am well, I hope you are the same. So now we are in a place where we should be able to check this. And again, this is so minimal that what should be left is like a skeleton of the schedule. So we should say checklist, filter schedules, and we're going to pass in the grade level school year, so the school year object, because that's the first required argument. Then we're going to pass in our synthetic schedule here. And we need to, I guess, bring in the checklist class. So from homeschool teachers, models, import checklist. Do I have a graphic representation of my database? I do, and I'll bring it back up in just a second. Okay, so the final thing to do is now we want to assert. Remember, I was modifying the schedules in place. So if I did this right, the only thing that should be left is basically this stuff minus that dictionary. So let's yank all of that stuff to the end and put it here. And I need to make sure this is actual proper Python syntax. So this I realized the thing that I forgot too. So we're actually not going to need the checklist object directly. So this test will actually pass right now. But it's because it didn't do anything. It didn't actually hit these lines of code. We didn't get down here. The reason, there are a couple reasons. Or no, there's one reason. The reason is because there aren't actually any excluded courses in our checklist factory. So we need to add that. So excluded courses is going to be equal to, just to be really clear about what I want the stir of the course ID. And with any luck, this test will fail now. Hey, it failed. Cool. Which means, kind of hinting to me that that this over here is working. Because let's try that again just so you can see it, and I'll do a test that shows more verbose output. hopefully it'll display it a little clearer. Yeah. So here's what I listed as the expected thing, and then here's the actual thing. So you can see that it trimmed out this inner dictionary, which is exactly what we wanted it to do, and left behind this empty list. So now it's time to update the that to be this, and let that run. And then, so Shiva and I will let's open the models diagram again, and then I'm going to let the test suite run in the background while we talk through the model diagram. So I brought up this piece earlier in the stream, and we'll talk through it again. So this is coming from, and I guess I didn't really talk about where it's coming from, but this is generated by my tools. I've got a tool that I can show the makefile target, but it's coming from the Django extensions project. So if I've referenced this one in the past, but if there's this Django extensions package that you can add to your Django project that has some commands and all sorts of other little goodies available to it. One of them is called graph models, which is what we're looking at right now. And it essentially adds a new management command called graph models that you provide the list of apps that you want to see, and it will generate your models diagram. That's what I'm showing here. So, 100% coverage. Fantastic. So we'll look at the makefile. So whenever I do make graph, it runs my graph files, graph models command, and it runs through all of my apps that I've added here, and then outputs it to that PNG file. This is a newer option on that command, which I think is marvelously useful. It is the rank direction, and BT means bottom to top, I think. This is very specific to GraphIS, and they just exposed it as a flag. So it's kind of a weird thing to have a flag, but it's a very logical thing. I'll explain in a second. So if we zoom in a little bit here, what the BT does is it affects what goes at the top and what goes at the bottom of your models diagrams, and it flips the order. So actually, I can show this off what the differences look like. So in this version with BT selected, I've got abstract user, which is a thing coming from Django, and all of my abstract stuff is at the top. And then I've got user, and then all the things that it has, and all the things that belong to it, and all the things that belong to it. So to me, it makes the thing that you want, which is like, I've got a tree of related stuff. I want the most abstract thing first, the thing that is primary importance, and I can see it, and then I can get deeper and deeper and get to the leaves of the tree and find the pieces that matter. So by the time you get all the way to the bottom, you got this grade object, which depends on these things, which tiers up, tiers up, tiers up, until you get to the top, which is the user that you care about in your system. If you take that option off, so let's just delete it for a second. Source control is great. And make a new, let's generate a new graph. And open that same models diagram again. And you can see, maybe not well, I'll zoom in just a second, what this incarnation of it does is it puts those leaves at the top. The little, like the most detailed bit about the thing that depends on the thing that depends on the thing that keeps going down, that's at the top, which maybe my brain is weird and doesn't work like everybody else thinks this way. I don't know how y'all feel. I did not like this in terms of ordering for this model diagram. So I much preferred to have the abstract thing be first and get deeper and deeper into the system, so that I've got my user, then I've got my school year, then I got my grade levels, then I got my courses, and so on and so on. So that is a flag, or a command line flag worth knowing about. because if you choose to use it on your graph, whatever your graph is, I think it makes a world of difference in making it easy to understand your models. So that's what I do for my model stuff. Database optimization. Do tell. I'm curious. What about optimization is tickling your fancy right now? So we now have 100% coverage on the app changes, and I guess as a bit of a review, we added this new model today, this checklist model. Oh, normalization. Okay, no problem. Yeah. Normalization is this funny topic, and it goes deep. So I went to graduate school in the States, and I went to Johns Hopkins University and got a computer science degree, and so I apparently know stuff, or I at one point knew stuff, and I was required to take a database design course as part of my graduate program, and I've seen, like, I had some people in that course that they work with government contracts that have just crazy schemas, and they think a ton about database normalization. For those of you that don't know what database normalization is at all, it's the idea of, it kind of is like, how much copying of data will you allow in the design of your system? And maybe the most basic example I can provide you is something like, imagine you were a user, or you are a user. Imagine you have a user model in your system, and you want to track the phone number of your user. And okay, your database schema needs some normalization. All of them do, and we'll get to how deep that can go. I promise I'll get there. But let's say you have this phone number on your user, and that's great initially. But what happens when you need two phone numbers? If you added the phone number directly to your user model, then you're stuck, at least initially, with one phone number. And Anora, I'll talk about front ends in a moment. Good question. So when you get to that point, what options do you have? You could either add phone number 2 to your user model and assume that you're only going to have spots for two phone numbers or something along those lines. But hopefully you can see that maybe there's another way. So relational databases would say, hey, actually, you could make a different table, which is a phone numbers table, and it could have a foreign key to your user table. So if you did that, then you could have two phone numbers, and they both point back to the original user with a foreign key, and now you can have as many phone numbers as the person has or wants. And that is the concept of normalization in a nutshell. It's separating stuff so that your data is not replicated in weird ways. So normalization has different levels of craziness, though. And so there are called the normal forms. And Shiva, maybe you already got this conversation with your stream. Somebody talked about this. But if you look up database normal forms, and you're going to find there's got to be here it is. I'm sure Wikipedia could say way more than you even ever cared to know. But you see, pay attention to these numbers: the 1NF, 2NF, 3NF, 4NF, up to 6NF. This stuff is what is describing how good of a job did you do at separating your data into ways that is not repeating stuff. And you can read all about when you thought there couldn't be any more, there's more. And yep, that's right. 3NF or 4NF is about the sweet spot. Because what happens is, while it sounds good in theory to have like no duplication, what you find when you get up these higher forms is they are really good about not replicating anything at the trade-off of having to have more and more database tables and doing more and more complex joins inside your database in order to put together any kind of information set that is useful to a user. So 3NF is about the sweet spot that you should pay attention to. So maybe read it enough to understand it, understand what third normal form covers, and maybe read about 4NF, but some of the fifth and sixth, they get really academic pretty quickly about what kind of stuff it's trying to do. So it's a fascinating topic, but I got my fill of it in grad school, and I think I'm kind of done with getting any more. So at this point, I'm kind of like, well, can I get my foreign keys in there in a way that I feel good enough about my data and knowing that I'm hitting about that 3NF area. Anwar, I might be saying your name really poorly. What about the front end? Good question. If you're talking about the front end of this particular feature, that was not the focus today. Today was on the data. So I like to have a process where I think through the data design of my system first, and once I get to that data design and build up the data, then the front end kind of follows. In my particular app, and he was very patient, that's good. In my particular app, I'm using Django templates to accomplish my needs because it works. I found that it works super well for my project as a one-person project. I don't have anything against people who want to use JavaScript applications and separate their backend API from their front-end client and have something very dynamic. That's all cool, and I do that at work, so I'm very comfortable with that. But for my project, that's it's all classic Django templates, which lends itself to pretty easy and quick manipulation. We will get more into user interface stuff next stream, which should be next week. I don't think I have anything that will block me from streaming next week. And it's at that point we will talk about the creation of checklists that we made today. So this checklist thing has no way to create itself right now, and we will make the form, the edit page that will allow a user to toggle checkboxes of which courses do they want to see in their checklist. And from there, we can create a checklist object, which includes the right excluded courses, which will power this whole feature. And so that's going to be next time. So for me, I think that wraps it up for the evening. I do want to thank you all for joining in. This stuff goes up on YouTube, so if there's anything you ever heard about or wanted to catch up on, I try and put some description in there. And there's a whole back catalog, and I really should commit the number to memory. But if you wanted to start with this project from the beginning, it's somewhere in the early 60s. I want to say 63, maybe. I believe the title is New Project Who Dis. And that is the start of this homeschool project that you can find on YouTube. Thank you for all your attentive questions. It was a good chat this evening, and I will see you all next time. Take care.